Hello, Davey. Thanks for clicking on the link. Before I get started on this video, might be a little bit thought-provoking, say the best word to put it. Really want to thank this bloke, Wise Up. I've followed his work for about 3 years now, and he just totally turned my archaeological world that I used to live in upside down. And there was a video that he put out 5 days ago now, I think, that really just, for me personally in my research, everything fitted into place. And fitted into place regarding the mud incident. When I very first got onto this topic, this subject, we've got the same as everybody else, really. You have what we commonly see in towns and cities right across the country, these low levels. This is abroad, you go abroad, and it's just the same. But when I first got onto this subject, I got thinking of how the hell could the mud have got there in the first place. And one of the first areas I looked at was mud rain. Now, I looked at and then very quickly dismissed because it wasn't really a very practical way of explaining how all the mud got there. I mean, mud rain is where the air is heavily saturated with particles of dust or volcanic ash, and it rains and it comes down like a soup. So I quickly went away from that idea, and then I started looking into hills, along with a few other people, and how, in between hills seemed to be mud flood affected in towns and cities across the country. And then I started, in my own mind, trying to format some idea that not only the hills, but churches on top of the hills as well. Because I've made a video about it. I did go down the idea of liquefaction, looking down the avenues of that. But even that didn't sit with me, because to get such an even covering all over, it just didn't really wash. And I've been busy doing other things. I've got into churches and all sorts of things, and I put this idea on the shelf, really, until I saw the video that Wise Up put out. And really, I'm going to try and talk you through how my research has got me thinking. Not only I think I possibly found some sort of evidence and timeline for the event, but I know in this field there's some people that think that the event took place in early 1800s. There's some people think it took event a lot later, late 1600s maybe. Now, I think I might have evidence that shines light on both. Not evidence. It's not evidence at all. It's the best way to put it. I don't know, pieces of the puzzle. Because you're not going to find a smoking gun anywhere that tells you about how this stuff happened. It's been purposely kept out of our history. They don't want us to know about it for whatever reason. We can only just imagine. So, like I say, once I saw the video the other day, it just lifted the lid off so many things for me. And what I propose really is that this mud hasn't come in the form of a flood. It's nothing to do with churches or hills either. But I think this mud really has come in the form of ash. I mean, it's not a new thing. People have talked about this before. But the research I've been doing, and why I'm showing you this oil drum is, I have garden fires quite often. I have an oil drum with a lid on. When I want a fire, I will in the middle of the garden, have the fire, next day turn it upside down, whack all the ash out. And it forms a nice little mound of ash that I usually shovel behind the shed. That's why it's grown like a jungle behind there. But what happens if occasionally I tip it out and I just leave it and it rains? That ash does actually turn in to like a lump of modelling clay. And that's what got me thinking, this is really how I think this mud has been laid down. I don't think it's been laid down in any form of movement of mud, for want of a better word. You know, starting at the top of the hill and rolling down and covering everything, because when you get a large volume of something on the move like that, it would just demolish anything in its path. I mean, you'd only have to look at a large body of water like the tsunamis. But that's where my train of thought is, and I want to try and just take, you know, how I look at things. This is modern day. You know, it's obviously near a very active volcano. But this is the type of shit that can be spewed out, and in quite a short space of time can deeply bury houses or buildings or whatever. Now, that's all you need is a little bit of water added to that. Little sprinkles, not downpours and gushes, and it will turn all that lovely ash into mud. You know, I mean, this is exactly what we see right across the UK. Buildings are being dug out now, but this is, you know, what we're actually seeing in the UK. Now, I can't speak for the rest of the world, but what I want to try and do is home in on a couple of timelines. So there's another one. So that people can, you know, that are interested in this, you can maybe go away and look in your own countries, you know, your local histories and that. And you might be able to pick out things in your local history like I've been able to do, and I'll show you, you know, in a little bit. See, this is another picture here. It's where ashes rain down. It's where they've had rain afterwards, and it's just totally turned it all into the thick mud and the clay that we see that's been surrounding our buildings in the UK. There's another one, another pretty picture. So that's really how I think all this stuff was laid down. I really do. And I think there's possibly two timelines, as I've already said. So I'll get into them now, I would think. Right, I want to try and explain a bit about timelines and archaeology, and what my hobby's been for, I don't know, the past 2.5 decades is a hobby called field walking, whereby you spend many thousands of hours over the years walking over agricultural land, usually, to look for evidence of past occupation. Now, I want to talk about missing timelines because it's something I thought was batshit crazy until I started looking into it, until I started speaking to Miss Havisham, who are one of the people I first heard it from. And what we've been able to do over the last, 6 weeks or so, backwards and forwards, to and fro, is the timelines that I'm missing stuff in archaeology are the same timelines that she seems to be missing in her research, and it's a totally different field, a totally different avenue. Mine's the agricultural, archaeology side, and hers more the academic side. But I have artifacts going back 9,000 years, 7,000, from Mesolithic, Neolithic, then we come into Bronze Age, which are these things here. These are your flint tools. I'm showing these basically because this is how far back my artifacts go through the hobby that I've done over the years. These are all Bronze Age finds. Now, once you leave the Bronze Age, hang on, let's go back one. These are all Bronze Age finds. Once you leave the Bronze Age, you actually come to the Iron Age. I don't have any artifacts from the Iron Age, but I know where there's Iron Age sites near where I live. So I know there's been occupation during the Iron Age time period. After the Iron Age, you move on to the Roman. Now the Romans, I can only go by pottery, were pretty on the ball. you know, with the buildings and the structures we know that they're built. And also the pottery, which is what interests me. Now this is how you usually find pottery when you're out in the field. It's usually coated in mud and the tiny fragments. But this is what the Romans were capable of, pottery-wise. You know, there's some pretty exquisite stuff, as you can see. But on the other side, the domestic use and the lower classes use, you do still have, you know, your basic greyware cooking pots. Now what seems to have happened, my dating evidence, the last Roman pottery that I've got dated about 300 AD. Now then there's a gap of about 600, 700 years to 1100 when I start picking up evidence of occupation again. Now it's called the Dark Ages for a reason, I think, because archaeological wise, see, I mean, once you get from this Roman period, you then move on to early medieval period. I've just shown you the splendour of the Roman pottery. Now, we move on supposedly several hundred years. And this is the best we can achieve, because this is early medieval stuff. You know, there's a huge gap in time where I've got no evidence of any occupation around this area. It doesn't mean to say there hasn't been any occupation. But it's this missing period, and it's also this aspect of pottery design and pottery making. You know, it went from very classy and clever in the Roman times to going back in towards the Stone Age when you come into medieval times. And this is one of the big time periods that miss Havisham. See, this is the best that the medievals, you know, 700 years later, 600 years later, that's the best they can put out. But this is how I find date everything, you know, bits of pottery. I mean, early medieval stuff, it's just basically like plant pots, really. So that's a little bit on the timeline. But what I'd like you to do, because I can only explain from the archaeology side, if you go onto Miss Havisham's website, onto her channel, and what I'll do, I'll link a couple of videos at the bottom as well, where she explains from sort of like the academic point of view, the missing timelines. And what this really does show that, you know, we're so far apart in the hobbies and interests that we've had over the last 30 odd years. But yet we've come up with, you know, similar results, I suppose is the best way to put it. Right, time team. I'll just throw this little one here. Medieval period. Time team, there's a dig they've done on Holy Island in Northumberland. And what it was in medieval times, there was a period whereby it was far safer for people to drink beer than what it was for the water supply, because the water supply was contaminated to such a degree that people were being sick. But when you take water and you make beer out of it, you've got to boil it. And that's obviously must have killed off the parasites, and that's why beer became so much of a staple part of your diet, basically. So I'll just throw that in there, and you pick up on it later on. The next records I'm going to go through, and just show you and try and put a little bit of date on this, is in my local record books of Stockton and the neighbourhood. Now, there's nowhere, as I said, you're going to find a smoking gun, but you might be able to find little clues. And it flashed back after seeing the video to this entry. It's in 1680. And it's in this month, about the 18th day of December, so they've got that pretty bang on. So, you know, the date I wouldn't have thought's in question. But anyway, they appeared a mighty dreadful comet, or blazing star, about northwest, and continued all winter, to the amazement of many people. It began of so great length and breadth, and that summer after was the most terrible drought. Great scarcity of hay and grass. It made the poor cattle low, would have pitied me to have heard them. Well, I mean, that straight, just that little passage there, I mean, this comet, whatever it is, it's there all bloody winter. You know, it's not only there all winter, but when you come round the following year, there's no grass, there's no hay. And if you can't grow the basic fundamentals like grass for the cattle, you know, what chance have you got of growing crops? So in a very, very, very short space of time, you could have, you know, absolute chaos to begin with, and then the mass dying out of people, starvation. You know, whatever this comet, this thing is, it's contaminated the land to such a degree that the cattle are screaming in the fields because they're starving, you know. And these are the type of clues, this is why I'm putting out this video. It's the type of clues that you pick up in local history books or local folklore or things like that. You're not going to find any evidence. Now, as to whether this was, you know, what caused it, I've got no idea. But it's the main point I want to make is how long this bloody thing was hanging about. And, you know, it must have been given some display, you know, to the amazement of everybody. But the absolute shit and chaos it caused afterwards. Now, just moving on a couple of years, in Stockton history books on 3 years. So you've already had all them drought and shit that's killed off the cattle. Most terrible frost and much snow began about the later end of November and continued to the middle of February. In this frost there was tents built on the tees and the whole sheep roasted upon it. So I mean the winter was that harsh and that severe that the river Tees had froze over solid and there were roasting bloody animals on there. And at that time it was tidal. So you're talking about one thick coating of ice, so the world seemed to be in a pretty desperate state at that time. Just going on these few bits of evidence. Right, that's a comet. No noted all about comets at all, but I just had a quick browse. Now, the Stockton comet, as I've just shown you, it was in 1680. Enlarge this a bit. 1682, Halley's Comet. Now, if the comet in Stockton caused that much devastation, if this is a comet, the same type of thing, it will have continued on with the devastation, surely. Now, the thing about Halley's Comet is, I think it's once every 70 odd years it's supposed to return. But after doing a little bit of reading, and it was only a little bit, Halley's Comet was around then, 2 years after Stockton Comet. But there was another comet came by in 1689. Now what they tried to say is that this bloke Halley reckoned that it was his comet just revisiting. So it goes round every 76 years, apart from in this case because it doesn't fit, you know, the narrative. But the thing I want to, you know, just point out is the devastation that whatever comet was caused in my town, it will have caused this all over the country, surely. Now, this is what I call the early date, you know. People have said the mud event was, you know, this later date, early date, whichever way you want to look around, 1680s. And there's people have also said that it wasn't. It was in the early 1800s. Well, we'll go at the early 1800s here. 1811. Whoever that gadget is, that's who named the comet. Unprecedented 17 months visibility. So if there's a comet gone by and it's affected the visibility for 17 months solid, what the hell was this comet dragging with it or dumping on us? And it's these entries here. See, there's also another great comet that come just a few years after that. That was 1811. That's 1823. So, you know, you've had two comets that have come one after the other in the 1800s, which some people reckon the event happened. And you have two comets that have come in the 1682, that one. So really, I've just put out there, make of it what you will. This is where my research has taken me. And, you know, I can only say what I see. It's the most plausible answer that I've come across. How this stuff has been laid down in the form of dust, ash. The rain's added to it to form the mud deposits that we have today. I don't believe anymore that it's any form of mud flood. I believe that it's ash events that have caused this. Now, like I said, this is just me bouncing ideas around my head. You know, just putting my thoughts out there. And to see what people's responses are, because, you know, could this be possible in your area? You know? Despite what we're told officially what comets are, as I've just seen in, you know, my own history books, that they're devastating things when they come by, and they can last years, and the total devastation and breakdown of everything if there's no food for the cattle. So I'll put it out there just to see, you know, what your thoughts are, and could this work in your area, regardless of where you live. I can go on another video how I think, you know, these events actually occurred, on what form they occurred, but I'll save that for another video, really. I need to do a bit more research on that, but yeah, thanks again for listening. You know, when is a mud flood not a mud flood? Well, when it's an ash event, of course. Bye now.